Hell to the king, baby. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just acting a little too much into character, but fortunately I got rid of a lot of those demons. So I think now it's about time to get back to this ranking and talk about the Sam Raimi movies that are actually really great, including this underrated gem of a Western.
Hey, Etch, draw. Oh! Got me again.
Now, here's a film that sounds like a match made in heaven. Ever want to see Sam Raimi direct a Western? Well, now you can, as in 1997, he came out with this film called The Quick and the Dead. Despite what the title may suggest, this is not a horror film in the slightest, nor does this involve zombies of any sort. Okay, that combination coming from Raimi does sound quite awesome, but The Quick and the Dead actually centers on a gunman known as the Lady, coming into this old town run by an outlaw known as John Hurd. Not only does the Lady have to save this old western town from his tyranny, but she also has to participate in this gunslinging tournament in order to face off against the evil Hurd. It's a pretty simple premise that leads to this film being essentially a western all about shootouts. Now, you add in Sam Raimi's quick, fast-paced directing from his camera work and editing, and you got yourself one of the most fun westerns I've seen from a talented director. The majority of this film is filled with these sequences, and they're every bit as engaging as you would expect from Raimi. Not only thanks to its rapid style of editing, making you not want to miss a second of this, but it's not afraid to be fairly violent too. There's a decent amount of blood and gruesome kills that do add to this exciting energy this western has. What also really helps this movie out is the fantastic cast this movie has to offer. Like, this possibly has the biggest cast of any Sam Raimi film, with so many well-known actors making appearances. You got Sharon Stone as the leading lady, Gene Hackman as the great antagonist, as expected, along with a ton of other stars including Lance Hendrickson, Russell Crowe, a young Leonardo DiCaprio, and what's a great movie without legendary actor Keith David. While the characters aren't the deepest, the amount of stars and how much fun you have seeing them having fun in this film makes it a great time. And that's the excellent thing about The Quick and the Dead. It's just a fun time. It helps combines a lot of the great elements that Raimi is known for, all into a different genre that we haven't seen him tackle before and haven't since. I'm not sure if he would be able to top this movie, but I'd be game to see another Sam Raimi western in the mix due to how good something like this turned out. If you like any Raimi films and haven't seen this, then definitely check out The Quick and the Dead. It comes highly recommended from me, for sure. Certainly one of the most unique and best films of Raimi's lineup. So, let's move on to the next one.
With great power comes great responsibility.
So, wait, what are you saying?
Oh, nothing. I feel like renting a DVD. Something action-y.
Ah, yes. Who could forget everyone's favorite neighborhood Spider-Man? Where Richard Donner's Superman and Tim Burton's Batman initiated the comic book movie genre, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man kicked it into high gear. This film was one of the main films to have turned Marvel into a worldwide phenomenon that it is today. Because this is a film that was literally bringing the comics to life for a lot of longtime fans of Spider-Man. The X-Men movie that came out 2 years prior was also popular, but where that felt more like a modern movie update, Sam Raimi made a film that embraced its comic book origins. This is a film that embraces the less serious tone, yet not to a distracting degree like other Marvel movies. Okay, maybe slightly distracting, but that's part of the reasons why I've seen so many varying opinions on this movie over the years. But I think now that the hype has died down for years, this is still a really good superhero movie. In some ways, it's still a little dated like Batman 1989, but has enough to offer that makes it a very entertaining time from beginning to end. Sure, this tells you the Spider-Man origins, that's been told plenty of times by now. But this was the first movie to showcase the origins of Spider-Man to this big of a scale. And I say it works fine being the first adaptation of this character. It's not like 10 years later we got another origin stories with Spider-Man that didn't do anything new with its origins while playing it off as the untold story. No, that would be stupid. In terms of datedness, well, the movie does feel cheesy, and often very corny. It's a movie that is hard to take seriously at points, yet it still pulls it off due to how much of a personality this movie has. The characters stand out big time in this. And who else to begin than Tobey Maguire? Honestly, I always liked his Peter Parker. You can make fun of all the cringy and doofy looking faces he makes at points, but to me, this is Peter Parker. Parker was this less fortunate dweeby kid who has a lot of brains, but also had a lot of social awkwardness. No offense to Garfield, but I prefer the more dorky Peter any day. And to Tobey's credit, he has a ton of charisma here as this character. He's geeky, but in that weirdly charmy sort of way, because he does do what a hero should do and shows how well he was raised by his good old Uncle Ben. I know some people have minor faults with Tobey's version of Peter, and the weirdest one for me was always the complaint that Spider-Man doesn't have web shooters. Oh, it's not like the comics! But does it matter that much? If anything, it might be because I didn't quite read a lot of Spider-Man comics growing up, but I always thought it made more sense that he just can naturally do it. In fact, if I'm being honest with myself, that's actually the funniest scene in Spider-Man No Way Home to me. The simple fact that Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland are so weirded out by the fact Tobey doesn't have any web shooters. Like, bro, you serious? It shouldn't be that weird, so yeah, that complaint is kinda dumb. But enough about faults. Let's just go on to more good stuff, because the supporting cast here is also quite good in this. Kirsten Dunst and James Franco do a fine job here. But the true standouts of this film are, of course, say it with me now, J.K. Simmons and Willem Dafoe. Both of these actors are pretty much guaranteed highlights for any film, and I think a lot of people, myself included, this was their formal introduction to them. Simmons played J. Jonah Jameson as this very over-the-top caricature that is perfect for a film with this kind of tone. He looks the part and acts the part perfectly, and is just filled with so many great lines and moments. And what can I say about Willem Dafoe in this movie? So much that he's the only thing about this movie that's the best in the whole trilogy. Not to say that Spider-Man 2's antagonist is bad, which we'll get to later, but Dafoe steals the show in every scene. How could you not remember his lines?
Out am I?
He's just one of the most quotable villains ever. Not to mention, he can be mightily threatening, and even did his own stunts just embellishing as this character. Yeah, the costume looks like a Power Rangers knockoff, but it's still a fun movie. And plus, there's always this.
Here's the real truth.
That always will get a laugh from me. Either way, this movie is really enhanced by its cast, and not to mention the directing and great moments included in this film too. The scenes where Spider-Man swings through the city are so excellent. Yeah, the CGI at points doesn't age all that well, but the camera movement and all the smooth movements make this a very well done action film. Raimi gave this movie a good look. There might be some datedness too, though. The film can be overly schmaltzy at points, and it is cheesy. Not to mention, where Batman 89 had Prince for its end credits, Spider-Man 2002 has Nickelback. Yay! Though I should mention the score in this movie by Danny Elfman is also pretty good. It's one of the best Marvel scores for simply having a pretty memorable theme and some good motif here and there. I mean, in terms of Danny Elfman's scores, it's no ba-da-da-da-da, but I still think it's a pretty hummable theme that I still think of every once in a while. All in all, Spider-Man 1 is a damn fine movie. You can argue its datedness, but it serves as a very satisfying movie that I say, much like Batman 1989, it serves as a great introduction to the comic book movie genre. It's a film that I tend to enjoy more and more as time goes on, and always dig the exact kind of fun comic book film Sam Raimi succeeded with. I think all of you have seen this by now, so I don't need to explain why Spider-Man 2002 from Sam Raimi deserves a place in cinema history. So take that for what it's worth.
I'm everyone and no one. Everywhere, nowhere. Call me Dark Man.
So I had to watch this movie once, long ago, and remember enjoying it, only to have never watched it again until this year for this video. And I'm glad I did, because this holds up a lot better than I thought it would. Darkman is a lot of fun, being the exact kind of crazy, over-the-top superhero action movie you would want from the Sam Raimi that brought us the Evil Dead movies. The premise deals with a scientist who's been trying to develop a new formula to help burn victims in regards to their skin. He creates a synthetic skin that can be used to reform and recreate facial structures perfectly. The only downside is that the skin he creates works better in dark areas. Though after a freak accident where everyone thinks he's dead, he uses this successful formula to recreate his face, and use this shape-shifting ability to become the vigilante crime fighter known as Darkman. For being the first major studio film from Raimi, the man brought us an incredibly original and fun superhero movie that isn't afraid to be violent and over the top. The action in this is a good early indication to why he was a good fit for Spider-Man, with how creative the camera work and editing is to really make this film feel very much like a comic book. Much to be expected from Raimi, and I think it's also held together pretty well by Liam Neeson as the title character. Liam Neeson really does a lot to make you care for this character, along with making him as badass of an action hero as he can be. He has a ton of range of emotions here for a film that gets fairly extreme with most of its filmmaking techniques. I think he fits this crazy film very well. This movie also just has a neat look, with the whole destroyed lab set piece being a very creepy and cool lair for this character. It makes me think of Phantom of the Opera, with this along with the love story angle in this as well, which might sound cliche, but I think it works for a film like this, cause it's not the exact main focus, because you still get an incredibly entertaining film that is every bit of a Sam Raimi fun fest as you want from this director. It all leads up to an ending hinting at potential sequels, though unfortunately, I have not seen any of those sequels because admittedly, I can only assume they're not that good. I mean, they're not directed by Sam Raimi, and they don't even have Liam Neeson returning, so what's even the point? Either way, we at least have the original Darkman, which, if you haven't seen it yet, it's a really fun time. One of the most memorable action films of Sam Raimi's career, and kind of a good indication of the kind of fun he can offer with his films. Oh yeah, and Liam Neeson does this.
Yeah, see the dancing freak. Pay $5 to see the dancing freak.
Yeah, good time. Let's move on to the next film.
Soon it will be you who comes begging to me.
Hell yeah. You're now looking at the film that actually inspired me to make this video. Drag Me to Hell was Raimi's triumphant return to the horror genre. When this film came out, people were kind of curious to see how Raimi does after the disappointment of Spider-Man 3. Could he still deliver a horror film that's still on the crazy over-the-top level as the Evil Dead movies, with a PG-13 rating? Surprisingly and thankfully, yes. Drag Me to Hell is a great return to form for Raimi, being about a young bank loan officer who is in line to get a promotion at her job. This ends up leading her higher-ups to force her to make tough decisions to get the position, as she has to deny an extension of a mortgage for this struggling old woman because capitalism has to screw over innocent people for no reason. But she just dealt with the wrong old bitch, as this older woman is actually a gypsy who curses her to be tortured by numerous spirits for her wrongdoings, thus leading to a film that is every bit as slapstick violent as any other Evil Dead movie, with just seeing our main character get the ever-loving shit beaten out of her, and her trying to fight against that, and it's awesome. Which, you think the violence in Doctor Strange 2 was way too extreme for PG-13 standards? This right here is 100 times worse, and I am genuinely shocked that this didn't get an R rating. From the amount of characters just beating the hell out of one another, and even some very gruesome moments, gives this PG-13 horror film an edge that you definitely wouldn't expect from the average horror film with that rating. This film is filled with a ton of fun spooks utilized with Sam Raimi's sense of fast-paced editing, varied camera work, and a ton of humor, not being afraid of being very comedic with a lot of its scary elements. I mean, this film has a demonic talking goat in it, so how could it not be?
You black-hearted whore, you bitch!
As crazy violent as it is, it's also pretty funny in a slapstick sort of way, and much like something like Evil Dead 2, part of the joy is also seeing how our main character is able to handle these extreme situations all by herself. It almost feels as this movie was in the same universe as Evil Dead, with how the leading girl is off to face off against whatever demonic creature she faces on her own, in the same vein as Ash did in the Evil Dead movies. Which I also wanted to add, there are some layers to this movie character-wise, as we do end up wanting the character of Christine to achieve peace and make it out of these situations alive. We get a decent sense of what she's like with a struggling past and a fairly decent relationship with Justin Long, making her fairly likable, but at the same time the film also wants you to question her morally. She does do some things in the film that are rough and maybe even considered horrible. I mean, after all, the events that propel her into this situation in the first place was partially due to the decision she made with her not helping that poor woman. At the same time though, you could also make the argument that it's not so much her doing it out of maliciousness, she's more so a victim of circumstances leading her to be the bad guy in some capacity. Yet she still does these shady things regardless, so you still question her. But I argue that the pressure made by the demons and capitalism are the real enemies in this film, all leading to an ending that, I'll say right now, might not be the most satisfying one. Not going to reveal too much, but let's just say you get what you expect with a title like Drag Me to Hell. However, in some ways, that also makes this film stand out by not being the typical horror film at the time, and being more something that was made out of creativity. This feels right in line with the very best of Raimi when it comes to the horror genre, and if you still haven't watched this, and you like Evil Dead, give it a watch. In fact, with the PG-13 rating, it can be a good introduction to Sam Raimi horror more so than Doctor Strange 2, because it doesn't feel like it makes too many sacrifices despite its rating. Whether this be your first Sam Raimi horror film, or you're watching it again as a longtime fan, I say this film is totally worth getting dragged to the depths of hell to watch this Halloween season.
Wow, our very own Simple Plan concert!
With Sam Raimi making a Coen Brothers style movie before with The Gift, and even working with them at one point, you'd think he'd make another film that strives to be like one of theirs. Well, this time he did it really well with the film A Simple Plan. The premise of this is that a group of friends find this abandoned crashed plane in the middle of the forest. They search inside to find out that the plane contained a bag with $4.4 million. wondering what they should do with the money, they end up agreeing to leave the money at one of their homes. And when others finally discover the plane and don't question the money whereabouts, then they'll decide on what to actually do with it. Of course, with a premise like that, you know it's going to eventually go wrong, with a lot of conflicts of interest at hand over the course of this film. This leads to a very compelling mystery and drama that really gets you invested and what these characters are ultimately going to do. Partially because, much like Drag Me to Hell, as much as you root for these characters, you also question their moral values. It becomes even more emotionally compelling when you know about the history behind these friends and how something as simple as this could drift them apart in such a destructive way. It's a different kind of film that we're not used to from Sam Raimi. This doesn't have the extreme camera movements, wild editing techniques, or the overly comedic moments that we're used to seeing from him. However, that's perfectly fine here, because Sam Raimi still manages to create a very well done drama that's still very well crafted. It's still very beautifully shot, with a lot of great use of this film's smaller scale set pieces, and a really tight script that has some very captivating dialogue that give these characters a ton of personality. Not to mention the performances here are all top notch, with the late Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton really taking advantage of this script. It's odd to me that Sam Raimi hasn't done too many films of this caliber, because this is a very welcoming change of pace. I figured because this isn't what we're used to from this director, like I said, this feels more like a Coen Brothers films at points with story and dialogue. However, I totally welcome when a director goes outside their comfort zone in terms of what kind of films they direct to bring something unique to their filmography. When it's done well, like something like this, then it becomes all the more appreciative that a director took a risk and did something different. If you haven't seen A Simple Plan, it's worth your time. Don't expect the typical Sam Raimi flair here, though you'll still get a worthwhile thriller drama that is definitely worth your time. Maybe not enough Sam Raimi action for you? Don't worry. I'm sure the next iconic film on our list will provide many of that. Now let's get started with talking about one of the very best sequels to ever come out of Sam Raimi.
I made a choice once to live a life of responsibility. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man, given a job to do.
Yep, I'm part of that group of people who think Spider-Man 2 is the absolute best in the entire Sam Raimi trilogy. This film stands tall as a good example on what a sequel should be. It improves any potential fault the original film had and expands upon this series by giving us a film that goes further with how it tackles its character and story. Spider-Man 2 is a fairly compelling film since it's not as focused on the origins. Instead, it dedicates its time to really fleshing out Peter Parker as a character and all the dynamics he has with the other cast in this film. This movie really explores the idea of Peter having too much pressure on being the iconic hero everyone loves, and if he should still take the mantle of being Spider-Man. It's an engaging drama for how you're really able to really connect with Peter Parker in this, and seeing how he exactly goes through with this in a way that makes him a very understandable character. Even the other characters get a lot more to do, with MJ having more feelings towards Peter, and Harry having to struggle with the fact that everyone's favorite superhero killed his own father. Oh, and let's not forget the villain here. Which I'll admit, the only thing that Spider-Man 1 has over the sequel is a better villain. However, that's not to say that I think Doc Ock is a bad antagonist by any means. This is more of a good act that's just really hard to follow. I mean, Alfred Molina is up against Willem Dafoe after all. You can't really top that. Regardless, Alfred Molina is a really great foe for Spidey to go up against. He has a tragedy that compelled him to be the way he is, and this actor just has a lot of fun in this role. He's not as maniacally evil as the Green Goblin, but he has more of a sophistication to his work, which I say fits the character really well. I think most people can agree that Alfred Molina manages to be quotable and compelling as an antagonist for anyone to really really like his character in this. Why else did the director of Frozen marry Doc Ock? No, seriously, look it up. Jennifer Lee is actually married to Alfred Molina. I'm actually being completely true about this. Look it up. There's a lot more to this film than the first. Yet every so often I hear someone complain about this movie. Occasionally I hear a decent amount of, oh, this film isn't all that good. It's overrated. There's this small thing I don't like, therefore it makes it bad. And to that I say,
You serious?
yeah, this movie has too many iconic moments for it to be labeled as simply a bad movie. There are plenty of fantastic moments to appear in this film, big and small. With Doc Ock alone, you get some amazing sequences, including his first attack in the hospital, which is 100% a sequence that Sam Raimi would do. And it's awesome, with so much creative camera work and horror-like elements right out of an Evil Dead movie. Hell, they even made a small nod to it if you didn't notice it by now. In fact, the action in general here is just awesome, with a lot of excellent set pieces that really add to this film's energy. I mean, who could forget that awesome train fight sequence with Spidey and Ock? It's one of the definitive action sequences featuring the character of Spider-Man. Unless if you're Spider-Verse, very few Spider-Man movies can be that great in terms of action. As I also mentioned, a lot of great small moments too, from the great Bruce Campbell cameo, the iconic pizza time moment that I know for a fact many of you quote on a daily basis.
Whoa! He stole that guy's pizza!
And J.K. Simmons back again, this time even having more great moments as J. Jonah Jameson. Seriously, how was this movie perceived as not that great? Especially when I haven't even talked about probably my favorite scene in this whole movie, an unforgettable cinematic triumph, and that is the raindrops keep falling on my head scene. Wait, what?
Raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling.
Yeah, I genuinely love this scene. It's cheesy, but it's every bit of Sam Raimi corniness that I feel is appropriate for a movie that manages to have a good time and to help balance out with the more darker moments. I don't know, something about seeing Peter being happy with his life set to such an iconic song just puts a smile to my face. And that's a good way of describing Spider-Man 2. Just a good time that's every bit as likable as a movie should be. Is it the absolute best sequel of all time? Not quite, even by comic book movie standards. And hell, even by Sam Raimi standards, there are sequels that I can point to that are a lot better than this. Yet at the same time, this still has everything that a good sequel should have, to the point where I definitely can't fault those who see this as one of the very best sequels. It's exciting, action-packed, and an all-around gripping film that everyone's favorite neighborhood friend Spider-Man deserves. Nothing is worrying this film's perfect placement on this countdown. A great sequel to add to Sam Raimi's great lineup of movies.
'Cause I'm free, nothing's worrying me.
But in my own way, I am king.
Hail to the king, baby.
What's a sequel that tops the greatness that is Spider-Man 2? While Raimi's very own third installment in the Evil Dead trilogy. Army of Darkness is one awesome experience of a movie. If you want a film that is a straight up good time and manages to be every bit as radical of a movie of this era could be, this is it. It's a strange end to the Evil Dead trilogy, as it instead focuses more on the humor aspect of it, with the series increasingly getting less serious with each installment. Not as much horror elements this time around, but that's okay. For one, it still has a lot of fun spooky aesthetics with great production design and costume/makeup effects. Plus, as a film on its own, it makes for an excellent action comedy. There are so many iconic moments and memorable lines that create for an incredibly funny movie.
I got news for you, pal. You ain't leading but two things right now, Jack and shit.
and Jack left town.
Taking place right after Evil Dead 2, where Ash is teleported into medieval times, Ash has to stop the Deadites from invading their kingdom. If I can compare this to any other movie in terms of the kind of movie this is, it would easily be Thor Ragnarok. The third installment to a series not primarily known for its comedy, is going full force with its comedy. But it gets a pass because this time it is genuinely funny in its execution. Plus, they even have a similar basic plot with a fish out of water like premise, only it's an incredibly badass character not going to the real world, but instead a world that is even more wacky and bizarre to contrast him. Both do this super well, though Army of Darkness does take the cake in the more iconic film in my opinion. I mean, a film with a character as awesome as Ash Williams definitely makes it a masterpiece. This character is so cool, and also so comedically played by Bruce Campbell that it is a performance of a lifetime. One cannot forget all the quotable lines he spews, and like in the other Evil Dead movies, he still gets the ever-living shit beaten out of him in the most entertaining way. This movie has it all. Great lines, comedic timing, zombie witches, medieval knights, and warrior skeletons playing musical instruments. How is this not one of the best movies ever made? This is right up there as one of the best third installments of trilogies, alongside Return of the King and Toy Story 3. Oh yeah, it is that awesome of a film. Sam Raimi and his team should be proud at creating a film that is as rad as this one. What else can I say? This film is one of a kind. But believe it or not, there's only one other film that was able to top this masterpiece of a movie. And that particular film just so happens to be...
Legend has it that it was written by the Dark Ones. Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Roughly translated, Book of the Dead.
Swallow your soul.
Yeah, how could number one not be Evil Dead 2? In the same way Army of Darkness was on the level of excellent third installments, Evil Dead 2 is in the league of films like Empire Strikes Back, The Dark Knight, and Blade Runner 2049 as some of the absolute greatest film sequels of all time. I am actually being completely serious about this. It's a second installment that improves any potential fault the original might have had and turns it into an experience of a lifetime. This is a horror film all about atmosphere. Where the first Evil Dead was revolutionary, this film cranks that up to 11 by having some of the most creative filmmaking at the time of its release for any horror film. All the way Sam Raimi makes you feel like you're in this journey with Ash is truly a feat to behold. The interesting thing about Evil Dead 2 is that if you haven't seen any of the films, you don't have to necessarily watch the first to enjoy or get this. The film actually starts out as if it was the first movie again, condensed into 10 minutes. A weird choice for a sequel, but there's a reason behind that. You see, they originally wanted this film to recap with footage of the first movie. However, they couldn't get the rights to their own film from the studios, so they had to settle with just recreating the scenes within the film. Yeah, copyright laws make a whole lot of sense. But even then, some people like to view this in a funnier light, thinking that Ash is just stupid enough to go into the same cabin again. And if you want to look at it that way, sure. Regardless, this film excels at it being essentially a one-man show of Bruce Campbell. What makes it work is that you're in this experience with him as Sam Raimi creates a horror film that's one of the most atmospheric films I have ever seen. It's mostly thanks to all the incredible camera work done by Raimi's crew, as this film is notable for having a ton of long tracking shots that just chase around Bruce Campbell. How dedicated this crew was to making these tracking shots make you feel like you're almost being chased right alongside Ash is simply incredible. Also, Just the designs and effects used to make all these monsters, sets, and blood create for a very extreme horror film for the time. But Sam Raimi didn't forget to have a great dark sense of humor. While you care about Ash as you're in this experience with him, you also just can't help but find it hilarious when this dude ends up getting the absolute shit beaten out of him. It's all done with great slapstick timing, and the movie is filled with a ton of hysterical moments because this film managed to not take itself 100% seriously. That might be weird considering how many characters are in peril in this film. But thanks to this movie's execution, you don't really care. And I think it's pretty clear thanks to Sam Raimi's direction. You can't help but laugh infectiously, and that leads to probably the greatest Halloween sequence in the entire movie, which is the laughing scene. This few couple of minutes is just the entire room bursting into an uncontrollable laughter that manages to be both effectively creepy and funny at the same time. It's creepy for how all of the strange things are just uncontrollably laughing, and it's nothing but that. It creates for an unsettling environment, but as it goes on, and you hear it, and you see the utter ridiculousness of who's laughing now, you start doing exactly what Ash is doing. Laughing yourself because it's infectious and just sums up the whole movie perfectly. It creates for a film that would be described as perfect for the exact genre it is. So, if I really had to pick one issue with this film, is that the other side characters that aren't Ash aren't the most interesting side characters. They do their job fine in terms of what their purpose in this film is, but I wouldn't call them anything super fleshed out or anything like that. However, that is ultimately a nitpick if anything, because the film doesn't really focus on them too much, and instead is, like I said, this incredible one-man show of Ash in this crazy haunted cabin and all the crazy creatures and curses he encounters. Evil Dead 2 is the movie that made Sam Raimi who he is today. A crazy, unique mind with a wild sense of humor. I'll always respect Raimi for giving us possibly the true Halloween experience, as this is my tradition movie every year for the season. You can't blame me at all, cause a film with this much atmosphere, character, and fun spooks should never go unnoticed, and it's why this movie has been titled as one of the very best films in the horror genre. A film with this much awesomeness with its effects, filmmaking techniques, and use of Bruce Campbell, all executed by someone with a knack for filmmaking like Sam Raimi, can only be described by one word.
Groovy.
Take that for what it's worth.
It's over!